Hi, I'm here to talk a little about working with the garage door app, what that means, why it's something you should think about, and some things you might like to try. Have you ever worked in a really close team and everyone knows what everyone's doing and you're all in sync and you're each doing your bit and you know how to support each other and you just keep on ticking off ticket after ticket, and every time you do, we'll look at each other and we shout synergy in perfect unison. I mean, it's magic when stuff like that happens, but it's super rare and it takes ages to get to that point. Have you ever spent a week trying to debug a problem that's really opaque and you're picking it apart, but nothing making sense? And you're banging your head on a brick wall, and eventually you go and ask some senior magician, and they say, "Oh, yeah, that happens. It's a known issue. You just need to uninstall that driver and use this version for a branch instead." And you just want to scream, "Oh, of course! Why did nobody tell me that?" Or maybe you've been the senior magician and you just want to scream, "Why did you wait until now to ask me about it?" Well, we can't all work like the first team. Sometimes you need to work on quite different things to each other. Sometimes you need a specialism, and there just isn't a whole team to work with. But it sucks being in the second situation. I want to present a way of thinking about your work that helps get some of that team's happiness before your team is the dream team with everything figured out, or when you're not in a big team at all. I've best seen it described as working with the garage door app. Robin Sloan talks about it in reference to the experience of being around physical craft businesses. He talks about the experience of walking past a glass blowing studio near home with a nice sign outside and the windows open, and a woodworking shop with the door propped open every day. And what a delight it is to ride past the door every day and peek in and see all the tools and the boards stacked up and what's different to yesterday and what commission's going on at the moment. Working with the garage door app is thinking about this as how you do day-to-day personal actions, not just product demos and customer feedback like we try and do for our products. Where we often talk about release early and release often, I'm talking about making it easy for people to see what your work looks like when it's not releasable. This applies for the way you work through big multi-stage things and big projects, sharing while it's in progress, but it also applies to small stuff that is finished, but it's maybe not significant enough to go and shout about. Your personal crib sheet for analyzing a pile of debug data, maybe. You're not going to formally release it and brand it version 1.0 and launch it, but you can totally just stick it somewhere that other people can stumble upon it rather than keeping it to yourself. And they can use it, they can contribute to it. You can learn from that too. Working with the garage door app means just giving some more visibility of how you're building what you're building when you don't really have something that you can present or publish or release yet. Allowing people to stumble upon stuff because you don't know what will be valuable to them until they come asking for it. So let them discover it in their peripheral vision instead. But why would anyone care what I'm doing right now? It's not worth shouting about. It stays in my notebook until I write it up, and then I'll share it. Well, there's a lot of valuable stuff in your half-baked notes, and a lot of that stuff won't ever get written up. Some of it because it's temporary and you've since iterated on it, but some of it because you just haven't finished yet. When you open up the garage door and you make that stuff visible, you might share that I tried X, but Y and Z were tricky, so I didn't carry on. And someone else might read that and say, "Oh, cool, I tried X too, but I didn't even know about Y and Z. I really want to make Z happen. Can we do that together?" You might reduce wasted effort. Someone else might be working on something already or have already solved this problem, and you can save yourself from a world of pain reinventing the wheel. Someone might see the way that you're approaching the thing and think, why would you do it like that and not like this? And you might learn about a new way of approaching something. By writing stuff down in a way that people can pick up on it asynchronously, you're also leaving a trail of breadcrumbs behind for the future. And you get some documentation of the way that your team's working and how problems got solved when you're looking back. And if you do it, then other people might also do it. And then you get to find out about opportunities to collaborate with other people on stuff that you thought was going to be boring and only affected you. And you get to observe what other people are doing and how they're doing it, and build up your own amalgamation of the best practices and processes from all the stuff that you've encountered and pick and mix that. This always happens a bit, but normally only with stuff that's directly relevant to you. So you make an effort to communicate about it. Maybe the IT team, though, have a really slick way of doing reviews that you'd never thought of, and they'd never thought it was special enough to actively go and tell you about. The more you work in the open a bit, everyone gets more shared context. So we don't have as many detailed specialists who have to be consulted on every single thing. And we can all be more cross-functional, at least get an idea of how something works before we go and consult with the expert. You might notice that all these things are the kind of issues that come up for discussion when we talk about remote work versus being in the office. You get some of this kind of passive visibility for free when you're all working in the same physical space. So it's really important to find ways to restore that when you're not all in the same office. I think describing this as a way to approach work sounds pretty obvious, but people often don't work in this way, and there's some good reasons for that. What if it's not ready? Maybe you're right. If it's something that really needs to make an impression and you only get one shot at that, then be more cautious. But if you're amongst friends and collaborators and it's just that you're a bit embarrassed about it, I recommend getting over that. The pros of sharing outweigh the cons. Your thing might also never be totally done to your total satisfaction. You might as well get some value from it. You might find after getting the courage to share it that you've already hit the 80-20 principle, and making it really done is diminishing returns. A mentor introduced me to the Court of Done manifesto a few years back. You've got to take it with a pinch of salt, but it challenged me to reconsider how I thought about my work being not done until it was polished and complete. What if you'll look stupid if you share it and everyone's going to think that you're useless? So just tell them that you're not done and you want to share it because you value their input. People love imparting wisdom. Claire Sudbury's got a great talk where she introduces this stupidity manifesto, saying, let's stop making each other feel stupid. It's about being confident in your own ignorance and about being excited and about exposing the stuff that you don't know as an opportunity to get to learn stuff or get to teach stuff. She also includes a lot of excellent cat pictures in her writing and her talks, so that's well worth checking out, even if you don't like the content. What if you might mislead your colleagues into thinking that you've really thought about this properly and they trust you on that when actually they should take it with a pinch of salt? And maybe that's a hazard, so handle the hazard. Communicate the maturity of the project that you're sharing as well as what it is and what it's for. If you're writing guidelines, then make it difficult for someone to unsuspectingly assume that you've thought long and hard about it and got approvals for it and stuff. By naming it as work in progress or draft or labeling it, maybe share it from a personal area so it doesn't pop up amongst the rest of your best practices. In a team area, maybe share it in a personal area so it's a bit obvious that they're looking in your personal notebook, but you still allow them to access it and make it searchable. So, a lovely lofty idea. Hopefully you get the value. But what should you actually do? Beyond the basic response of just try and work a bit more in public and share things a bit sooner, I'll put forward a few things now that are a bit more concrete than that. The first basic thing you can do without changing your day-to-day workflow is to think about what is that door that you can prop open leading into your metaphorical workshop. For a lot of us, that's going to mean go in and have a look at the permissions for your docs and your wikis and your repositories and see if people outside of your core team can even access those to read them. Consider making all that stuff open and readable by default. Often tools default to private. But do you need to do stuff in a private workspace if it isn't secret? Part of my reason for giving this talk is that I want to share some things that I've picked up along the way, nosying in other people's open garage doors. I've got 3 specific things that you might want to try out as a developer trying to work a bit more in the open. First, I want to talk about a how might we doc. These are a bit like RFCs, but with a really low barrier to entry. So you haven't got a recommendation yet. You're not looking for approval because you're not going to go and make any big changes before you go and do a bit more thinking and research and testing and discussion. Crucially, you're probably not going to send it around and announce it to everyone, but you are going to write some notes and leave them lying around for people to stumble upon and for your search tool to find. When someone else pops up with the same problem later, or you come back to it, you're halfway to an RFC already. And maybe others have already spotted it in the meantime and commented and given it a bit of thought. So we want to get better at architecture diagrams, say, and sharing those diagrams in a useful way was a problem that we identified. I knew there were a couple of different ways to solve it. Wasn't really sure what to do at the time or when we were going to get around to it. I did a bit of research that I wanted to capture, so I wrote it as a how might we doc in this labeled space. Just with some options of where we've got to, trying to put my finger on what the problem is that we're trying to solve and what I've learned about each one so far. Lots of links and half-baked ideas of how we might implement these things and where the problems are going to be. I've since pointed a couple of relevant people towards it when it's come up in discussion, and a couple of people that I think might have a strong opinion that I could gain some more information from. And we've got a shared idea now of what the best option probably is. So we can start to experiment before we've met up and had a big pros and cons meeting and figured out the right answer and made a big decision. So that's a how might we doc, and it's just some notes putting a finger on the problem that you're trying to solve as context and what ideas you're exploring to solve it. The second thing I want to discuss is using a tool called Just as a way of doing documentation as code in a really lightweight way. So Just is a command runner. It can do a lot of clever stuff, but the big sell for me is that the syntax is easy enough for other people to read that you can use it instead of writing down your magic incantations in a markdown doc in your repo. So when you're noting down how to use the tools to build your project, don't just write stuff down as a tip in your README. Instead, write it as a recipe in a Just file and link to the Just file from the README. If the reader's using Just, then fabulous. They can simply run the recipe in the Just file and recreate what you did. If they're not, then they've still been linked to a readable text file. It still looks like a command they can copy paste to a terminal. It's still pretty figure outable without having to learn much stuff. Nobody's lost any functionality, but now you can actually use what you wrote when you do that action. So it gets updated when you find a better way of doing it, and you update your runnable script as your notes before you do it next time, or something in your process changes. So write incantations and processes down as a Just file. That's your way of testing it as you go and sharing it with other people. And then it's already documented. When you commit the Just file, you don't need to remember or bother to go and update the docs. All your docs need to say is, here's the high level how it works. Go look at the Just file for the nuts and bolts, and we run it all the time as part of our CI workflow, so it's not going to be wrong. Finally, something a little bit fancier is a tech radar. A tech radar is a visualization that shows the way that you and your team or your organization is working, what patterns you use a lot, what tools you have in place, what platforms you're using frequently, or what you're just experimenting with. What I love about it is that as well as having all of your best practice stuff in the middle, in this like a docked ring in the center of the radar, you also have all the stuff that you're trying to make changes to. So there's some things around the edge of the radar that we want to do less of because we've learned X, Y, Z now, or we've got a better option, or something else that we're just trying out. We can't recommend it yet, but it's a thing. If you're worried about sharing stuff that you haven't figured out yet and you're not sure you can get behind it, a tech radar is a great way of communicating that it's just an experiment. I'm not hitching my wagon to it yet, but if you've thought about solving a problem in a similar way, let's chat about it. This is something that we're starting to use in engineering at Focusrite. There's a really neat tool that I'm showing here that AOE developed for their own radar, and they've open sourced it. Really easy to get started with. We've got these different rings that reflect the maturity of the thing on the radar. The great thing about this visualization is that it can be changed and updated over time from text, but it still shows some history of how the usage evolved over time. So it's built in that you haven't got the whole thing figured out when it pops up onto the radar. There's a really low barrier to entry for just sticking something on the radar in this assess ring, low stakes. And then you can record the history of how that changed over time. There was a great talk at Lead Dev Conference last year that introduced me to AOE's tool, but also some ways of using this and some benefits of how it helps you to make transparent choices about how you're using different technologies. I'll link to those. My favorite, most satisfying moments are when I make a bit of an effort to work with the garage door up and it finally comes in useful and someone else latches on. I get my head into a problem that I think will be simple and it turns out complicated. And I get deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole until I realize I've spent way too long on it already. And it's really not worth putting 40 hours into something automated that takes maybe an hour to do manually and only happens twice a year. But I've been writing my notes on Confluence, and then James pops up 6 months later and says, hey, I've got this problem. Weren't you looking at something like that a while ago? And I say, yes, I was. Start here, follow the breadcrumbs I left, and then I would love to make it happen. That is super rewarding. It would be great to make use of all that frustration that I went through. I've been consciously trying to work a bit more like this over the last year or so. So I don't claim to have a finished, thought-out philosophy of work here. I'm sharing a bit of my experience with the garage door open and some things that you might like to join me in trying out. There's a few things to be aware of, a couple of things to be aware of. The reason that it's easiest to write privately in your own notebook is because you know that you're only writing for yourself. I know presenting stuff can help to clarify your own thinking, and that's a good thing too. People say if you can teach it, then you understand it, and that's fine and that's lovely. But at least for me, I find trying too hard to put something in a presentable format can make it feel like too much effort to do. It's then a stage 2, and I just don't do it. But there's a fine line to walk here to get the most out of it. Open the garage door up, maybe write useful titles or give a tiny bit more context than you might go to in your own private notebook, but still primarily write for yourself. You're still probably the main reader, so don't go to too much effort trying to make it presentable. Just leave the door open for people to have a peek. Don't modify your day-to-day working practices too much. That's all. I'm talking more about open by default rather than publishing often. Working with the garage door app isn't publishing, it's just putting some of your unpublished stuff in an accessible place. You'll know you're doing it when, if next time someone asks you about something, you can share. Next time someone asks you about something that you can share some knowledge on, you don't get another to-do list item of write up what I found out about XYZ so that Sophie can carry on. You can immediately just say, yeah, I put some notes here when I was looking at that before. Have a look, see if it helps, and then totally let's have a chat about where the gaps are to fill and how we can work on it together to finally resolve it. Thanks for being interested. I've got loads of pointers to share to other resources that I've found and thoughts and references that have helped me out. They're here if you catch the slides later, but I'm also linking them in the Discord now for you to catch up on in real time. Let's chat.